August 1944. France. The German High Command watched with growing alarm as Patton's Third Army surged across the countryside. Towns fell almost daily. Entire divisions were cut off and encircled. The pace of the American advance threatened to unravel the entire German defensive line in the west. Facing a potential collapse, German commanders made a desperate decision. They committed their heaviest weapon to the fight. 72 heavy tanks, among the most feared machines Germany possessed, were rushed directly into Patton's path. On paper, they were nearly unstoppable. Their armor was thick enough to resist most Allied anti-tank weapons, and their powerful guns could destroy American tanks at ranges where return fire was often ineffective. In theory, they should have halted the advance. What followed instead became a lesson in how tactics, coordination, and speed can overcome even the most formidable technology. When the fighting ended, fewer than 10 of those tanks were still operational. The rest were destroyed, abandoned, or captured. The American advance was never meaningfully slowed. This is the story of how superior tactics shattered Germany's elite armor and how the myth of invincibility died in the fields of France. To understand how this happened, it is necessary to understand what made these tanks so feared in the first place. The Panzer VI Tiger was a massive machine. Weighing over 50 tons, it carried armor so thick that many Allied weapons simply failed to penetrate its front. Its 88mm gun was capable of destroying any Allied tank at distances where effective return fire was difficult or impossible. Allied tank crews feared encounters with these vehicles. A single Tiger could halt an entire armored column. The American Sherman, fast and reliable, was outmatched in a direct confrontation. It often took several Shermans to destroy one Tiger, and even then, the Tiger frequently inflicted heavy losses before being knocked out. On paper, the numbers favored the heavy tank. German propaganda elevated it to legendary status. Allied soldiers spoke of it as invincible, but it was not without flaws. The first weakness was speed. Even on roads, its maximum speed was limited. Off-road, it was significantly slower, unable to pursue or react quickly to a fast-moving enemy. The second weakness was reliability. Its complex engine and transmission were prone to failure. For every tank destroyed in combat, another was often lost to mechanical breakdowns and abandoned. The third weakness was fuel consumption. In 1944, Germany faced severe fuel shortages. These machines consumed enormous amounts of fuel and could run dry before ever reaching the battlefield. Most importantly, they were designed to fight defensively, positioned behind terrain, engaging at long range. When forced to maneuver, attack, or respond rapidly to changing situations, their advantages diminished and their limitations became critical. German commanders understood these weaknesses, but by August 1944, they had little choice. Patton's Third Army was advancing too quickly for conventional defenses to stop. In desperation, Germany committed nearly a full battalion of heavy tanks, 72 vehicles, in an attempt to halt the advance. On paper, the plan should have worked. At the very least, it should have slowed the American advance. It did neither. While many Allied commanders treated heavy tanks with extreme caution, Patton approached the problem methodically. He had studied German armored doctrine in detail. He understood that these machines were powerful, but rigid in how they were meant to fight. Their strength lay in long-range firepower and frontal armor. Their weakness lay in flexibility. From that understanding came a clear set of principles, not designed to outgun heavy armor, but to dismantle it. The first principle was simple: never fight on the enemy's terms. Long-range duels favored heavy tanks where superior guns and armor dominated. Those engagements were avoided whenever possible. Terrain, smoke, and rapid maneuver were used to close distances or attack from angles where armor protection was weaker. The second principle was combined arms. Heavy tanks could dominate other tanks, but they were vulnerable when artillery, infantry, and air power were used together. Multiple threats, applied simultaneously from different directions, disrupted coordination and overwhelmed crews. The third principle targeted logistics. These vehicles required constant fuel, ammunition, and maintenance. Supply dumps were identified. Fuel convoys were attacked. Forced movement alone often caused breakdowns before combat even began. The fourth principle was momentum. Heavy tanks performed best in static, defensive positions. Constant movement denied them that advantage. By advancing continuously and forcing repeated repositioning, mechanical weaknesses began to surface. In many cases, those weaknesses did as much damage as enemy fire. The fifth principle accepted a harsh reality. Engaging heavy armor would cost American tanks and lives, but avoiding it cost something more dangerous: time. Every delay gave German forces the opportunity to reorganize and strengthen their defenses. Forward momentum was prioritized, even at a price. These principles were enforced without exception. Tank commanders were not expected to disengage at first contact. Artillery units were trained to respond within minutes of reported sightings. Fighter bomber missions were redirected toward armored targets whenever possible. As a result, Patton's Third Army did not simply encounter heavy tanks, it confronted them under conditions they were never designed to withstand. By late August 1944, contact was inevitable. The exact location mattered less than the method. German intelligence had correctly identified the general direction of Patton's advance. Heavy tanks were positioned along likely routes, dug in behind terrain features, their guns covering open ground that American armor would be forced to cross. It was textbook defensive doctrine. American units would be expected to advance across exposed terrain. Long-range fire would engage them. The advance would slow, buying time for a more stable defensive line to form. But events unfolded differently. American reconnaissance elements detected the positions before the main force arrived. Within hours, the advance was reorganized. Columns were divided, routes were altered, movement became constant and unpredictable. When American units finally made contact, they avoided direct engagement. Artillery was brought in, not to destroy the heavy tanks outright, but to suppress them. The armor was too thick for consistent penetration, but sustained bombardment forced crews to close hatches, reducing visibility and coordination. As the shelling continued, American tank destroyers maneuvered into flanking positions. Faster than standard tanks and armed with high-velocity guns, they were not intended to survive prolonged frontal combat. Their purpose was to strike from the sides, where armor protection was weaker. Then air power entered the battle. Fighter bombers maintained close support, attacking with rockets and bombs. While direct destruction was not guaranteed, tracks were damaged, positions were abandoned, and pressure mounted. Crews found themselves under attack from multiple directions at once. Artillery pinned them down, tank destroyers threatened their flanks. Aircraft struck from above. Throughout it all, American armored units continued moving forward, not stopping to fight, but pushing past the engagement zones toward objectives beyond the heavy tanks. This was precisely the kind of battle these machines were never designed to fight. They excelled at controlled, long-range engagements. They struggled under coordinated, multi-directional pressure. The first losses did not come from dramatic confrontations. One tank lost a track while attempting to reposition under artillery fire. Immobilized, it was abandoned before American units reached it. Another ran out of fuel when its supply convoy failed to arrive, destroyed miles away by air attack. The collapse had begun. Attempts were made to recover the disabled vehicles. One heavy tank was hooked for towing by another. Both broke down during the attempt. Both were abandoned. Elsewhere, tank destroyers that had maneuvered into flanking positions struck decisively. Several vehicles were hit through weaker side armor. Ammunition detonated. The damage was catastrophic. Air attacks added to the losses. Rockets damaged tracks, immobilizing some vehicles. Others were struck in vulnerable engine compartments, fires forcing crews to abandon them. What made this collapse decisive was speed. All of this unfolded in less than 6 hours. German commanders had positioned these tanks with the expectation that they would hold for days. Instead, their defensive line unraveled in a single afternoon, not because of a single decisive blow, but because the American advance never paused. There was no lengthy consolidation, no withdrawal to plan a careful, methodical assault. Every available asset was committed at once. Artillery, air support, tank destroyers, all coordinated, while the main force continued moving forward. By nightfall on the first day, more than 20 heavy tanks had been destroyed or abandoned. The remaining crews were shaken. They had expected to dominate the battlefield. Instead, they found themselves under constant pressure, attacked from multiple directions by an enemy that refused to slow down. German commanders sent urgent requests for infantry support, air cover, and improved coordination with artillery units. Many of those requests were delayed. Others went unanswered. The rapid American advance had disrupted command and control. Units meant to serve as the centerpiece of a coordinated defense were instead fighting isolated, unsupported engagements. The second day proved even worse. American forces now had a clearer picture of enemy positions. Before dawn, artillery targeted known locations. During the night, tank destroyers moved into ambush positions. When heavy tanks attempted to reposition at first light, they were already under fire. Mechanical failures multiplied. Constant movement, exhausted crews, and the absence of proper maintenance took their toll. Vehicles designed to fight from prepared positions broke down simply trying to keep up. By the end of the second day, German commanders understood the deployment had failed, not because the tanks themselves were ineffective, they were formidable machines, but because the tempo and tactics of the American advance had turned their strengths into liabilities. On the third day, orders were given to withdraw the surviving vehicles, but withdrawal posed the same problems as combat. They were slow. American forces maintained the advantage through speed. Heavy tanks attempting to retreat were caught by pursuing tank destroyers and struck from behind, where armor protection was weakest. Fuel shortages worsened the situation, supply lines had been disrupted, and some vehicles ran out of fuel during the withdrawal. Crews destroyed them to prevent capture. Mechanical failures multiplied. The strain of combat and constant repositioning caused transmission failures, engine problems, and broken tracks. Disabled vehicles littered the retreat routes. Throughout it all, the pressure never eased. American artillery targeted withdrawal routes. Fighter bombers attacked retreating columns. Tank destroyers harassed the flanks of any force attempting to form a rear guard. Every attempt to disengage was met with renewed pressure. This was the approach in practice. The enemy was given no time to recover, no opportunity to regroup. Retreat was made as costly as defense. A German officer captured during the fighting later described the experience simply, "They had expected a battle." What followed instead was a pursuit. The pressure never stopped long enough for a defensive position to be established. Heavy tanks were most effective when static and prepared. That advantage was never allowed to materialize. They were forced to react, to move, to operate under constant threat. By the time the surviving vehicles withdrew beyond the immediate area of operations, the outcome was clear. Of the 72 heavy tanks committed to halt the advance, fewer than 10 remained operational. The rest were destroyed in combat, abandoned due to mechanical failure, captured or destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. The road ahead lay open. The weapon meant to stop the advance had failed to do so. So what went wrong? The answer extends beyond this battle and beyond the war itself. Superior technology does not guarantee victory. In technical terms, these heavy tanks outmatched the vehicles they faced. But warfare is not decided by specifications alone. It is decided by systems, coordination, and execution. Combined arms, tanks, artillery, air power, and specialized anti-armor units overwhelmed individual technical superiority. One heavy tank could defeat one opposing vehicle. It could not defeat multiple threats arriving at once. Speed and tempo mattered more than firepower. Rapid movement prevented heavy tanks from exploiting their strengths. Engagements were forced, broken, and bypassed before advantages could be fully applied. Logistics proved decisive. Fuel, ammunition, and maintenance determined whether a vehicle could fight at all. Disrupted supply lines rendered many vehicles ineffective without a single shot being fired. And finally, morale mattered. Crews entered the battle expecting dominance. Instead, they found themselves hunted, suppressed, and overwhelmed by an enemy that dictated the pace of the fight. That, more than any single weapon or tactic, determined the outcome. Their effectiveness declined rapidly. The fundamental problem was doctrinal. These heavy tanks had been designed for defensive warfare, holding ground, covering withdrawals, and counterattacking to restore defensive lines. They were being used exactly as intended. The problem was that Patton's tempo never allowed defensive battles to fully develop. By the time defensive positions were established, American forces had already moved past them, flanked them, or called in airstrikes. The battle German commanders expected to fight never truly happened. This explains why Patton succeeded where others struggled. Many Allied commanders fought the kind of battle these tanks were designed for. Slow, methodical advances, tank-on-tank engagements, carefully prepared positions. Patton refused to fight that battle. Instead, he imposed a battle of movement, combined arms, and relentless pressure, a form of warfare where the tank's strengths became irrelevant and its weaknesses decisive. After the fighting ended, American intelligence officers interviewed captured German tank crews. Their assessments were remarkably consistent. They had not been defeated by better tanks. In direct combat, American vehicles remained inferior. They had been defeated by superior tactics and coordination. One German tank commander later explained it clearly. "We never fought the same enemy twice. First artillery, then aircraft, then tank destroyers, then infantry. By the time we reacted to one threat, two more appeared. We could not fight effectively when everything happened at once." That was the doctrine in action. Everything at once, all the time. The destruction of the heavy tank battalion had consequences far beyond the battlefield. German High Command had committed its best armored force to stop the advance, and it failed completely. Any remaining belief that super weapons could compensate for American material strength and operational tempo was shattered. German commanders already feared Patton's speed and aggression. Now they feared his ability to destroy their best weapons. When intelligence identified his forces in a sector, commanders understood they could not rely on defensive positions or superior equipment alone. They needed overwhelming numbers, or they needed to withdraw. For American forces, the lesson was equally clear. These tanks could be defeated, not easily, not without cost, but consistently, through proper tactics and relentless tempo. Crews who once feared them learned that victory did not depend on having better machines, but on using what they had more effectively. The Sherman never became the equal of the Tiger, but through coordination, leadership, and speed, it did not need to be. 72 heavy tanks were rushed forward to stop the advance. Fewer than 10 remained operational. This was not luck. It was not a miracle. It was the result of superior tactics, disciplined coordination, and a commander who understood that pressure and speed could defeat superior technology. The lesson remains timeless. When facing a stronger opponent, do not fight where they are strongest. Change the nature of the battle. Use movement, coordination, and relentless pressure to make their advantages meaningless. What do you think made the real difference here? American tactics or German mistakes? Let your thoughts be known in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more stories where tactics defeat technology.